Hello and welcome to the Blueprint. I am so excited today to be joined by my new friend and visionary, Lorna Westwood. She is a marketing consultant, an organization designer, and a change facilitator based in Europe, but doing work all over the place. Welcome to the Blueprint, Lorna.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you. A little bit of background is we met in a regenerative economics course and quickly kind of had an energetics, connection and realized that we also have intersected in a couple different learnings within the Rebiz community, Project Tipping Point, and share a deep desire for a different way of being and a different economy, a different way of living. So, Lorna, I would love to hear more about your story in terms of you have really transformed your life and your job from your career, both around climate and around sort of your interpersonal feelings.
Mhm.
So would love to hear about your recent journey from kind of what you would call like the corporate world
Yeah,
to where you are today.
sure. Um, it's funny actually. I was trying to think about people often talk about this moment where something happened, some big change happened, some deep overnight realization. But I think mine was much more of a series of small realizations that happened over my life. And I think when I was reflecting on like what to talk about today, and in 2015, I started listening to the Rich Roll podcast. And I that was a real like turning point for me because I had no idea, like not because I wasn't interested or anything like that, but I had no idea that that veganism was more ethical, for example. Like I'd never even pulled on the thread of one thing leading to another thing, leading to another thing. And when I kind of got into listening to that, I was obviously learning not just about the benefits of plant-based food and but the ethics and everything that surrounds a whole food plant-based diet. And then me being very impulsive. I went completely vegan, obviously. And I tried to be vegan for a good couple of years, but I'm no longer vegan, but that's not because I don't believe in it. There's other reasons to that. But that was kind of one of the starting points. And then when I was in my corporate career, I was I became more and more aware of the rhetoric around the greenwashing, around corporate sustainability. Um, and I think I was still in that mindset though, where I believed that if we did more of it, if we did more, if we cut our emissions more, if we looked at all of our scope one, two, three more, if we did this more, if we made more recyclable products, it would all right itself. And then I was on a sustainability leadership team in my big corporate role. I was still working in digital marketing, but that was kind of my passion project. And and then I think gradually what's happened over the last few years of, my consultancy and my life and everything that's happened in the last 5 years from the pandemic, through to the acceleration of all of the climate change with the floods and the fires. And I think I've kind of slowly gone through this whole journey of pulling on that thread and seeing where it goes and exploring okay, this might happen. Okay, well, what happens if that happens? Well, this might happen. And I suppose just opening my mind to like emergent possibilities about, where economies could go. And then I think I started to really dive into the economy side of things, hence why obviously we met on the Regenerative Economics course at Capital Institute. But prior to that, I'd been looking into degrowth, I'd been reading about donut economics and well-being economy and just kind of really exploring like all the different routes of capitalism and, Jason Hickel reading less is more and all of these things. And there's so much I think that we're not taught about. We're not taught about in school. We're not taught about the how capitalism came about. We're not taught like about colonialism. There's so much that's kind of brushed over, especially in the UK, in terms of history. It's very much focused around the royal family and the monarchy, and this king did that, and this queen was beheaded, etc. And there's a much less modern history. I think it kind of stops at World War II and the Cold War, and then, you know, in kind of recent times. I mean, I watched a whole like series on Netflix called Turning Point about the Cold War, which was taught me more in 9 episodes than I'd kind of learned in my GCSE history. And I think just I am a very curious person, and I ask a lot of questions. I've always asked why. I think when I was very small, I asked my parents like, but why? How does Santa Claus, how does Father Christmas get in? And they're like, well, he gets down the chimney, but why? But how? Well, and that, but we have a gas fire. Oh, so he's going to need a key like to get in, but you can't possibly do that. That's not, I asked so many questions that in the end they just I was very small and they said, okay, don't tell your sister, but you're right. You don't
They
need
gave
to.
it.
They gave it. Um, but I think exploring all of these things has just led me to this point where I've had I kind of not a big realization, but a series of small realizations where I've come to think there must be another way. We must be able to imagine another way to do business, another way to live, another way that's, not focused on what we have, but who we are. And yeah, I think, yeah, that I suppose that describes it in as short a way as I can, really.
That is I love the curiosity and the drive to keep evaluating. And I think it brings to mind for me the concept of stationarity and the fact
Hmm.
that we're as humans only able to envision typically what we've seen in our lived experience or past history or what we're taught. And so it's like people aren't teaching that you actually need to press the boundaries of what's
Hmm.
possible. And, I think the term emergent possibilities that you mentioned sticks out to me particularly. And, I think a lot of people don't know about like Anthony Gramsci,
Hmm.
coined the term cultural hegemony. And he was an Italian philosopher who actually died in jail, with the idea that when an elite group of people control education, the commons, so, healthcare and, recreation and entertainment, along with the media, that it creates this illusion for the average person within the system that the system's too big to be affected, that
Yeah.
it can't be changed. And so I think that's largely what we're taught, maybe not explicitly, but there is this sort of feeling. And this, I see people say all the time, uh you know the system's too big, I'll never see capitalism fall in my lifetime,
Hmm.
it's not possible, not while I'm alive. And that those are just beliefs, those are not true. But what does the term emergent possibilities mean based on what you have seen in all these various, curiosities and learnings and education?
I think at its core, we don't you can't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I think we all are stuck in this kind of this is just the way things are. This is the way things have always been done, and so this is what we've got to do more of. And once you start to think, okay, but what if we did things like this? And what if we did things like that? Then I think it opens up your mind to actually, okay, you don't know what's beyond now, like this moment now or this moment now. Like you can't possibly know. And I think we're so wired and psychologically. for a negative bias. And to be, we're taught, and the systems that we live in, we're taught to be risk averse and to not step outside of the confines of the way you're supposed to do things. And I know from, despite being a very curious person, I suppose I wasn't really one of those kids who was very outspoken, and I was never really sort of told to speak up and stand up for myself. And, it's just kind of keep quiet and, just toe the line. And not explicitly, but it was sort of an unspoken thing that's kind of the way to sort of go through life. And I think as I've got older, and especially since I hit my 40s, I've kind of got to this thing of, well, I do question it and I want to say it. And I feel, especially now that I'm outside of the corporate world, that I can speak my mind more freely and express what might be and think, well, have we thought about how things could be different? Have we thought about, the way we could do things differently? And someone said something yesterday when I was in another call about how when she was in her corporate career, the more successful she got, the more sick she was. And
Mm.
she was like, I was becoming more successful and I was getting more sick. And it really resonated with me about how, when I reflect back now on, 5, 6 years ago when I was in that job, and how not just mentally, it was draining and totally, went against my humanity. Um, you know, but physically as well, I think about the habits that I was using to cope, and they were not healthy habits, and I was not giving myself time to rest, and I was just pushing on through and doing what needed to be done to sort of, and you become so tunnel vision. And I think that it takes you need to kind of get out, almost out of that, to be able to see. And I think things
Yeah.
like the pandemic, things like slowing down, where I live now, I live like in nature in the mountains, and um it's so key to me that I think the key to unlocking a lot of this is humanity has separated itself from nature so much. And this is why I'm particularly drawn to regenerative principles and regenerative futures, because it's so embedded in like living systems. And I think, there's a podcast, what's the podcast? Planet Critical, with Rachel Donnell, and she asks everybody who's on the podcast, like, why is the world in crisis? And I think, my answer to that is we think of ourselves as separate. We think of ourselves as separate from nature. We think, especially in the age of AI, and that's a whole other thing. And I think we could probably go off on an AI tangent for a good while, but we are nature. We're not separate from nature. And I think, especially now that we know so much more about the dangers of the fossil fuel industry and plastics, and it's not just stories about, oh, the the animals or the fish or the seals, or something out there which has been damaged. It's We have plastic in our blood, we have plastic in our brains, we have microplastics all over us, like inside us, and newborn babies are born with, microplastics in them. And I think that it's, unfortunately, we're getting to the stage now where these kind of pieces of information are actually making people go, oh, yeah, actually, it's not just out there, it's inside us, and it's starting to make that connection.
And I think that, I don't know if listeners of the Blueprint are as aware of sort of my day to day as a sustainability consultant,
Mm.
and really a sustainability, and it's, the word has been overused
Absolutely. Yeah.
egregiously, so it almost loses its meaning. But to your point of regenerative systems, I think that we setting a real baseline for this conversation is exponential growth of any kind, and growthism, which is what capitalism is rooted in,
Hmm.
is is not possible, mathematically speaking, nor is it possible based in any planetary boundaries that we're currently dealing in. And we are exceeding our planetary boundaries at dangerous levels. And that's not, I think that's exactly the purpose of what this conversation is about, is not to be causing despair or doom by the fact of what we are experiencing in this now moment, but about that there are many, many myriad possibilities of ways we can do things differently.
Yeah,
And to me, when you're talking about regenerative systems, regeneration as a term is really rooted in trusting nature and allowing nature to do what it knows how to do best, which is decarbonize. It is natural that carbon is created through plant life, and then it is natural that the ocean and the soil sequesters, the trees sequester the mushrooms, like all these beautiful, amazing networks that indigenous communities have worked with and communed with for all of time. Basically, 98% of humans' lived existence was in much more reciprocity with these living systems. And you remind me of so I'm really deep in indigenous worldviews and trying to
mhm,
learn everything that I can. And one of the main precepts and, main worldviews right at the very top is hierarchy and
yeah,
non-hierarchical thinking. And so when we're non-hierarchical, that's not only within humanity and our different versions of humans, whether we're different colors of skin, different sexes, different belief systems, which is already, a huge problem within our society, but that there's non-hierarchy of humans to anything else. We
yeah,
are the trees, we are the leaves, we are the soil, we are the water. And in fact, water is us. We don't survive without the air, the water, the
hmm,
food of Mother Earth's nourishment. We don't survive without Earth. We are Earth. So I love that sentiment. And I think where you and I really deeply connected was this concept of envisioning what is possible for humanity in synchronicity with these
hmm,
rhythms and with the earth. So I definitely would love to hear more I think what you were also keenly pointing into is like, I think that humans are highly uncomfortable with the unknown
yeah,
historically. And so is it actually just a fear of the unknown that is causing us to believe that we cannot affect the systems, because the discomfort of surrendering to
yeah,
the unknown possibilities is actually more uncomfortable than just being in this doomy kind of, moment, but we know what to expect from it?
yeah.
Is that a part of the problem?
Yeah, I think it is, I think that fear of the unknown and being constantly fed this bad news cycle and being constantly told about the bad news and just referencing COVID again, I think about how ill that personally made me mentally ill, like constantly with living with the bad news every day. This number of people have died, this number of people have died, this number of people are in hospital. And, you know, it's it's not one of the things that really helped me heal was to kind of turn off from that. And it's interesting because I live in a different country to so I don't speak the language necessarily of the TV news. I mean, I can understand it, but it means I watch less TV news and I consume less, mainstream media just by the very nature of the fact that I'm not in the country where I was born. And it definitely has helped me to kind of reconnect with my humanity and disconnect from this high stress, doom-laden kind of way of living your life. And I hear it from people back home and I hear it from people in my own family. Did you see this? Did you see that? Oh my goodness, and I think there's a responsibility to know what's happening, but there's also a self-care involved in monitoring and managing how much of that you consume. And going back to your question about the unknown, I think, I was joking, like saying, "Oh, I'm sure that some of the people I used to work with, like, think I've gone feral or something." Like, they
Love
probably
Farrell.
think.
We love Farrell here.
Um, but it's so kind of looked down upon and frowned upon to sort of to think in a different way and to sort of to go out, like to go outside of the norm and to go outside of, well, we have a business and this is what we do and we need to make money at all costs and we need to make profits for the shareholders and then we'll get a pat on the head when we grow and um that's just the way things are and this is we must show year-on-year growth and I mean I understand entirely like the term degrowth is has a massive PR problem because trying to actually explain it in a very simple way to people who perhaps have never heard of it before,
Mhm.
I think you have to be really careful about that. But once they do really understand and you ask them simple questions, I think, you know, should there be more? Should we measure ourselves against GDP only? Is that a good signifier of human flourishing and not just human flourishing, but planetary flourishing? Is that a good, and they can't, nobody can answer that question and say that it
Well,
is.
I personally feel that the answer is clear that it is not. But
Yeah.
that's because, if you look at human happiness indexes by country, the countries that have the best perception of equity within people, so non-hierarchy,
Yeah.
also have the highest happiness ratings. So in the US since the 1950s, we've steadily decreased in happiness
Mhm.
in alignment with the huge wealth inequity of the, 1% and the billionaires. Really, the rest of the, 95%, 98% of people haven't benefited deeply from capitalism in 60, 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
So, and then the other, predictor of longevity of lifespan is sanitation and water.
Mhm.
Neither of these
Mhm.
things, these are both connected to the responsibility of municipalities and of governments and really of the people, the collective people to prioritize water and sanitation and prioritize equity. So like to
Mhm.
me, those are the better predictors of
Yeah.
human well-being and resilience. But yeah, I resonate with a lot of that. And I think when you're talking about, with being in the corporate world and being sort of a loyalist to the company for the sake of the growth and for the sake of,
Mhm.
getting the pat on the head, that to me comes down to a loyalty to, are you loyal to this externality that is its own sort of energetic being that may or may not be doing good in the world?
Mhm.
Uh, and I'm not saying every company or every
Um,
corporation is bad by any means, but I think it's like, is your loyalty to this entity, this energy, this thing that is not human, nor is it nature?
yeah.
Or is it to yourself and your soul? And do you know what your soul is telling you? And have you listened? Because
Mhm.
I also think it's kind of like when you're in this constant, almost like survival mode, because um, there is so much grief to be had
Mhm.
in the world, whether that is climate grief, the grief around genocides and wars and all these very, very hard things, not to mention the things that are happening in your own backyard with inequity, with climate injustice at a local level, food insecurity. Like there are so many things, that can be low key stressors to us that we may not even be aware of. But are we grieving those things? And are we able to get through to the place of hope and acceptance where activism and possibility live?
Yeah.
So how can you talk about a little bit how you dealt with grief? Because I know when we've talked previously, you and I both have talked about having, hard times during this, all these learnings and
Yeah.
understandings and seeing the bigger picture. How have you, first of all, how did that affect you? What
Yeah.
affected you? And then how did you move through that?
Um, I think, you know, when you talk about the grief, I think it's something that we you become very acutely aware that even if you do your very best to kind of live your life in a way which not only does no harm, but you know, seeks to be part of you know, regenerative future. Like you know there's a grief there because you know that you'll never really, I don't expect to see it in my lifetime necessarily. And I it's a
Now,
strange,
I feel like but I feel like we're gonna see it. I think we're gonna see massive change at an unbelievable scale in the next 10 years. And that's where I'm always like, okay, but I
yeah.
feel like I want to just pause and say, I think those words are different, and maybe that's a part of our
Mm.
collective belief and movement forward. Anyways, not to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, no, I I think I'm kind of torn between this kind of those two points of view.
Mm.
And but I think when I'm referencing the grief element of it, I I have had to come to terms with the fact that I have spent a large proportion of my career accelerating that growth and therefore participating in those systems which have contributed negatively to the world. Now, I'm just one person. I have forgiven myself for that, we're part of a system, but I think that is one part of it. The second part of it is it feels so futile to try to stand up to it sometimes because especially this year, as we've seen already, there's been some very big changes geopolitically, and I think that, it can feel like, what's the point? Things are just, the people in charge are just going to do things their way and they're going to completely take control. And we have all my agencies removed, but I feel very differently to that. I feel very hopeful still. I have a belief, a deep belief still. And we've shared this, as I'm sure you'll mention, but we've shared this kind of this view that there will be an acceleration towards something good. And I think one of the things that I feel very strongly about is we all have this individual agency to work collectively, to have collective action, to take whatever small steps you can. And if we all take these small steps to take a stand, to actually, you know, be progressive and bring around positive change, that things will, the more that we are believe that we have no agency and that we cannot, then, you know, the more the system is kind of won. It's kind of,
Right. Well, and I think that's exactly what cultural hegemony and or
mm,
the concept intends, is like essentially removing agency and ability to believe in your own power,
hmm
in your
hmm
own um consciousness, in your own ability as a creator, that you don't, basically all that agency is taken away. And spiritually, um I deeply believe in David Hawkins, the scale of consciousness, and the ability as individuals to raise consciousness in ways that raises consciousness in
hmm
larger footprints, right? So if you're able to hold a frequency that is so high, you are able to support, other people's, just by proxy, raising a frequency. So it's hard, it's interesting because being in this space of, the facts of science and what we've witnessed and seeing all of the things and the ways in which it is negatively impacting the planet in our visual, and very real perspectives. Um, I also dance in this other quantum theory realm where it is like, okay, so our hive consciousness is creating this experience. But, astrologically speaking, we're about to enter the most mystical time of our entire lifetimes with the Pisces entering the north node, which is essentially going to put pressure. It's a pressure cooker on the entirety of the planet as to either kind of align with awakening and these more greater depth of understanding, more heart coherence, more
Mhm.
connection to others and the collective good, or it's going to push people possibly into distraction and addiction and sort of running from the
Mm,
discomfort in which you
yeah,
don't want to see within. Because if there's enough pain that you're trying to run from, that can also have that effect.
yeah.
But I deeply feel the energy has shifted already, and that we are in this acceleration of a unity timeline, which is what I kept hearing after the US election results.
Mhm.
This is an acceleration of the unity timeline. And I think that had it been the other way around, had the Democrats won, it would have been less obvious to the world and to everyone
Mhm.
else about the intentional polarity that
Yeah.
is the divisiveness that is being created with an attempt to control. And that so it is hard, I think, because it's like I kind of always am saying it's a both and, like we've got to
Yeah.
do all the regenerative work, we've got to do the
Yeah.
regenerative, and also really deeply listen to nature. And that's also indigenous wisdom. Thinking is listening and listening to Mother Nature. So with all these, tech bros and AI guys out in Silicon Valley that are, full steam ahead on all things AI. It's like, have any of you asked a tree or, you know, Mother Earth what she thinks about
Mm,
all of this? And this is the age of Aquarius. It's tech. It is going to be a tech focused space, but it's got to be tech that's in alignment with the highest good for all. So
mm,
that's not just for the tech bros,
yeah.
and um anyway, so I want to know, have you like, I really want to get to the juicy parts of like what you see and what you envision and what this new earth, what these new ways of being, some of the things that you see and feel. But do you have any like rituals or self-care modalities that kind of keep you grounded through these challenging understandings?
Mm. I think there are things that I don't do, and there are things that I do. And the things that I don't do are as important as the things that I do.
100. Wow, love that.
So the things that I don't do are, spend too much time doom scrolling.
Mhm.
Um, I try to be silly. I try to be like laugh. I try to, you know, um, just behave in a childlike way, which comes very easily to me.
I
Uh,
love that.
and I I spend time in nature. I love being, in the mountains. I love being in the snow. I love hiking in the summer. I love taking time when I'm on a walk to just look at actual nature, like actually what might not look aesthetically pleasing to the eye, or that an AI image of what nature looks like does not look like this, but it might be an upturned tree where the roots are sticking out, and then you look at all the different moss and all the different kind of native plants that have grown on the base of that. And, just maybe, take a photograph of it, or just sit and look at it, or just sit and breathe the air, or notice the color of the sky. Like, I'm very aware a blue sky is so many different types of blue. So a blue sky might be a very vibrant blue if there's very few clouds, or it might be a really pale pastel blue. And the other day, I said to my partner, have you seen the sky? Like, look at the blue. Look at that blue today. Isn't that really unusual? And I love clouds. I love like not I don't necessarily study clouds. I know that there's an awful lot to learn from looking at clouds, and it can tell you a lot about the weather and what's coming. But yeah, just those really simple things. And the things that I don't do, I recently I try to be very intentional about what I put into my body, and I try to be very intentional about making sure that I have, nutrient rich foods, and I very, very rarely like drink any alcohol now, which is a massive change to what I used to be like when I was living the corporate life. And, that was just part of, oh, let's go and have a glass of wine to get over how horrible the day has been. And um, you know, so I think I do feel very in tune with myself as a human, and exercising and getting my heart rate going and all of these things about just being in my body and appreciating my body and sleep, like getting enough sleep, like respecting resting. Like the beginning of this year, I was sick as a dog. I was so ill. I had some horrible virus. I don't know if it was the flu or if it, what it was, but I just had to go, okay, I'm in my pajamas for 10 days basically. Like, and just respect what my body was telling me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I personally believe our bodies are our Mother Earth, our gifts of Earth. And so being in our bodies is wild because it has to be an intentional practice. And
Mm,
it does require consciousness around sleep and,
breathing,
proper
yeah.
nourishment, even pleasure. Like I feel like listening to your body of like what kind of food you want to eat, like, and even, I mean, to me, I've done so much work around unpacking sexual pleasure and all that
Mm,
kind of stuff, but deeply connecting to the fact that we are here for a reason as humans in these bodies on earth and all this wild time to be alive. So I love that it feels like you have a lot of embodiment practices that are really conscious. And
mm,
I also agree. I really, really limit my intake of news, and I've been logged off of social media for a little bit and it feels so, so nice.
mm.
Um, so as far as what you see and the possibilities, like given all that you've learned, but also just what you intuitively feel, what kind of possibilities are you most excited about the creation of a new way of doing the economy, of creating new systems? Like what are the main ideas that kind of you are feeling most inspired by?
I think I'm definitely seeing two things. So one is a move towards citizen-led futures and doing things together collectively to shift the dial on the kind of world we want to see and the world we want to live in. And people just actively turning away from looking to the government to solve their problems and to actually be, you know, with their co-workers, with their colleagues, with their communities, with their neighborhood, and seeking to do things together to just take control collectively. I think that is something that really hugely inspires me, and people not waiting to have things done for them, but just going, you know what, this is what I want to see, and so I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna do it. Um, and the other thing, I'm gonna have to pause here now because I've totally forgotten my train of thought.
Okay. The it's really the recreation of community and and
Mm,
community focused activism and connection, I think that is the topic that keeps coming through for me too, is, it doesn't as much matter what is going on out here in this, what I would call kind of a media manipulation. It really matters deeply what's going on in your own backyard. And
mm,
like that is also where government and I actually saw this whole YouTube video and podcast about how really local government has so much more impact and is so much easier to affect change within.
yeah.
So like really hyper localizing your your strategy, your thoughts, and also understanding like that's truly what affects you,
Hmm.
your community.
Yeah. I just remembered the other thing that I was going to say
Yeah.
that I've seen. I don't think it's just because I'm in this bubble of regenerative space and I'm in the regenerative, looking at how marketing can contribute to being regenerative. But I think I'm seeing a shift away from consumption as being just the accepted way.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing a pushback. And it's not just in like I say, a small kind of tranche of the world. It's it's in bigger things, that people are, you know, making fun of people who consume too much. And people are actively kind of taking a stand towards that. And there's kind of, under hashtag under consumption core and, people actively looking to, you know, shop sustainably or do, trial a gift economy or, try to repair things that they own and to shop more intentionally. And, I think that, even there's even this funny guy on Instagram who he has this thing where I'm rich, you're poor, and he takes, he takes the mick out of people who just excessively do things, and I'm doing this because I'm rich. Look at you, you're poor. You can't do the same as me. But it's done in such a way that it's really flipping the narrative to say to sort of hold up a mirror to this excessive, private jet fueled, luxurious lifestyle and say, is that really the way? Is that really how you want to live? So I even think in comedy and even in being silly and, all of those things, I think there are ways to kind of shift the collective narrative on that.
Totally. And I think, I mean, I deeply feel like consumption and overconsumption is like a crisis of self-clarity around what you really what we really value,
Yeah.
and what is essential to human well-being. I have this wild like piece of cardboard because every time I have like a cardboard or whatever, I basically upcycle it into art or like use it as some sort of like think pad. And one side of the cardboard is the metrics of human well-being, like what is essential to human well-being, what are different avenues for degrowing the economy and recreating structures that are more in service to, really a shared experience of good, including indigenous worldviews and, various kind of indigenous wisdom. And on the other side is like a mind map of the actual true economy right now.
Mm.
And really talking about, okay, what are the things that actually are essential to life, and
Yeah.
what are the things that map out to the well-being of humans and the well-being of the earth, and all these other things on the other side. And it is really interesting because I think it's just all so interconnected around consumerism and consumption and the psychological manipulation of advertising and media to make people feel really disengaged, disoriented, and enchanted with their bodies and
Yeah.
with their enoughness and their
Mm.
worth. and
Mhm.
so much of this is so psychological, but um to your point, I think there is so much opportunity, and I don't know if it just requires the time and space for introspection
Yeah,
to get deeply familiar with what it is that actually is your metrics of human well-being and planetary well-being, and what you really need as a human to flourish and survive. Because um this amazing a new friend said, we need identity, belonging, and purpose.
mm,
And when our identity and our belonging waver, if we have purpose, that can hold us.
I love
But,
that.
belonging is community. Identity is knowing who you are. And purpose is knowing who you are enough and listening so deeply to what your soul's calling you, that you have an alignment with under like a bigger meaning, a bigger reason to be here and to participate. And I think I can guarantee that most corporations are not providing the deeper
No.
soul purpose. And when I'm saying most corporations, I'm talking about, the most environmentally degrading
Yeah.
corporations, not the ones that are out there doing, you know, humanitarian and planetary work. But it's cool because I consulted, or I supported this. It's called Trashy Markets, and it's by this amazing group of women, the Nowhere Collective. But they're bringing in all these upcycled artisans, and also, we talked about having sponsorships for people to teach people how to like fix their shoes and how to fix their leather goods or
Yeah.
their jewelry, like all these really amazing skills that really got pushed out of the way in
Yeah,
service
totally.
to capitalism and exponential growth and in, quote unquote innovation, but really like that make us feel connected to ourselves, our community, and
Yeah.
our belongings in a deeper way. So I love
So
that.
much. Yeah. And yeah, just those skills. And you see it now, even my parents' generation, they have, skill repairing skills and DIY skills and fixer-upper skills. And, they just kind of, they're inherent because they needed to use them. Whereas I think latter generations, oh, it's worn out, it's got a hole in it. I'm just gonna either throw it away or buy a new one or, sell it and get a new one. And I definitely feel that there's a lot of kind of there's some amazing feeling that you can get if you have that self-sufficiency to be able to create something yourself or repair something yourself or kind of it just takes you back to like an earlier sort of humanity that used to live like that. And it just really has such a powerful kind of feeling to make you connected, I suppose, to be able to do things with your hands and make things with your hands and to create stuff. I mean, even just creating, like we consume not just things, but we consume so much media, we consume so much, you know, video. We are creative. We are creative beings, and it's even if it's the most simple thing like coloring in or doodling or just writing down your thoughts or journaling or it shifts your mind. I think that it just I really want to lean more into my creative side, like whether that's an artistic thing or whatever that might be.
Well, it's so connected to flow and I think childhood, and I loved your intention of being silly and having fun, and I think all those things are so also often attempted to be taken away from us for the sake of busyness and really to supply labor into the
Yeah.
capitalist market. in ways that are the most optimal for returns for the specific people that have benefited for so long. So I think deeply that, radical rest and radical fun and radical pleasure and, really being in our bodies and getting back to returning to knowing who we are as individuals is the biggest like power we can take back.
Mm,
Because it's just easier to see and easier to unravel the things happening outside of us that are potentially attempting to keep us in that labor market.
mm,
And I think you and I have both pulled the chute on the labor market in ways that are not necessarily always comforting or
mhm,
easy. Um, but I hope that you feel like I do in that I've never felt more aligned with my
mhm,
truth and abundant in spirit and in connection to people and conversations like these that really fill me up in ways that I never could have imagined and definitely didn't feel when I was in my more corporate
mhm.
lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think that's just going back to what you were saying about identity and belonging and purpose. Sometimes when I go back to London, or I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love London still. I don't choose to live there anymore, but and I sometimes, people watch and see like how people are spending their time. They're spending their time in retail, therapy, and and it's it's not to draw criticism, but it's to say you can see how it's so easy in the systems that we have that someone's identity can be tied to things and can
Mm.
be tied to how they look and can be tied to if you're living in this world where you wake up and you go to the office or you know you, you're in this system, you're in this kind of I hate to use the word mechanistic because I feel people use it all the time, but you're in this process and you're not really treated as a human. I don't, you're a human resource. Like
You're a
that's even
consumer.
what they call it. You're a human resource. And there's people think there's no issue with calling it that. And when you sit back and even think about what that actually means, that's mind-blowing to me that you can be a human resource.
Well, right, and a consumer, and um, it is, I think at the root of it all, and I have friends that they love, and I love fashion, like I love self
Expression.
expression,
Yeah.
art. I mean, there's no question that how we show up and the ways in which we present ourselves, obviously psychologically have a lot of meaning both to us and to the people that we're with. And so it's not a disrespect or an ignorance to, you know, the psychology associated with that.
Mm.
But I think that it's a question of what is behind the reason that you feel
Yeah.
the call. What is behind the reason that you feel so called to buy this thing or do this? And I have this 30 for 30 thing that I say, if something's over $30, wait 30 days to buy it and see if you still need it. If
Interesting.
something's under $30, wait 30 hours and see if you still need it. And ultimately, there's so much more art and creativity that can be created in the world around upcycling and like using the resources that clearly already exist in mass, where we can engage as individuals and artists and creatives and support our local community who's creating something way cooler than what Gucci's coming out with.
Hmm.
That to me is like the opportunity of like bringing consumption to community, like at a community level.
Yeah.
Can we support each other in ways that are enlivening, but also create stories like, wow, I got this cool upcycled sweater from this guy that's like doing all these amazing things. Like there's just so much more opportunity for a depth of connection
Mhm.
and a depth of, you know, feeling, I feel like, and feeling good about how you do show up and consume in the world. And I think with degrowth, I'm supporting the Degrowth Institute and some stuff that's going on there. And his John Mulrow is the director, and his biggest thing is just encouraging conversation around the intentional degrowing of the economy. And
Hmm.
and that's as simple as it gets. But it's like that means something different to everyone, but most certainly it begins and is very rooted in consumption.
Yeah, yeah. I think as well, it's really interesting. I feel more at ease having conversations with random people about what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, what might be. Whereas I spent a lot of time, I suppose, historically keeping quiet about those thoughts, and not for want of being criticized or but just thinking there's no way that this person will understand what I'm talking about here. There's no way, it's so far gone that I can't possibly expect them to understand. But I think I've got much better in recent times at being able to just engage people in conversations that I never normally would. Like, you know, I was chatting to my hairdresser like about regeneration and sustainable marketing, and we had this amazing conversation, and we ended up like critiquing the way that the economy is run, and how entrepreneurialism is not you know encouraged in the market that we live, and da da da, and how people work for big corporations, and it was a fascinating conversation. It was a really fascinating, and I just went with it, and I just rolled with it, and she was open to it, and we had a great time.
Well, and I think that brings a really great point that I have talked about recently and also just experienced is sort of when we create this idea that maybe people won't be interested or they don't share
Yeah,
our same passion or
yeah,
maybe they don't understand these concepts explicitly. Whereas, and this is a common psychological problem within the sustainability well, within climate psychology is that, people essentially assume that others don't care when
yeah,
really, 5 out of 7 do care. And if you
yeah,
were to bring it up and talk about these concepts, that you would actually have a majority of people. And that kind of goes into my belief that all humans are inherently good. And basically, until they are told or they do something in which they create a belief otherwise about
yeah,
themselves, that that is the baseline. Like the average every person really does intend for good and really does love the earth and really does want to see a better way of living and being for themselves and for the future. And if they aren't focused on that, it's just because they can't deal with the deep fear associated with
yeah,
the alternative.
yeah. I think that's just sparked a thought. People are so afraid of being bored today.
Hmm.
And, you know, it's so easy to just be constantly preoccupied. And I think this again feeds into this idea about knowing who you are and knowing your true identity and your true purpose. And if you're constantly distracted, how can you ever be expected to know that? Because you never just sit and just be bored. And I see it especially in children as well. And it does concern me that definitely remember being bored when I was growing up. Though, you had to use your imagination and make up a game or do something and with my sister, and you know, I wasn't constantly distracted
Totally.
by things.
I see that too. And I wonder, I'm curious about the root of it, whether it is just the convenience. I think there's a lot
Mm,
of convenience of
yeah,
distraction or if it is avoiding feelings that come in the present moment when you are quiet enough to receive them, whether that be things from your past or, beliefs that, I mean, I think there's a myriad of ways that can present, but ultimately asking yourself in your present now moment, like, why do I feel such discomfort with
Yeah.
being present with myself?
Yeah.
'Cause I think that is where um the unknown lives, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the unknown, as we have talked about, is can be deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Wow, such a truth. And boredom, I think that's what's so interesting. I used to run so hard from being present with myself
Hmm.
and run to the past and the future always, and not ever in the present. And realizing now, like after being with myself and really unraveling the myriad feelings and things that I avoided for decades, um, but I love being with myself and I
Yeah.
love being present and I love being in those states. Like I could be alone for days and days and I would be like totally cool. But it's wild because it takes work to get there.
Yes. Yes. 100%. All we have is now, right?
Yeah, so good. Lorna, this conversation has been amazing. Thank
Thank you. It
you
really has.
so Thank you so much for joining the Blueprint. Is there any other, I mean, given such amazing wisdom. Is there anything else, first you'd like to leave here in this conversation? And secondly, how can people find you to connect, collaborate, commune, and create something new?
I don't really think there's anything. I mean, there's so many things that we could just keep talking about, and it's been like a real pleasure to have this conversation with you, Marley. I love what you're doing with the blueprint, and I feel really honored and grateful to be a part of it. So thank you. I think I'm floating around a lot of spaces right now, so you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website. I'm part of the With Life community, which obviously is the where we convened for the Regenerative Economics course. I'm part of the regenerative marketing movement. You can find us on Substack and on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, and I'm also part of the Citizen Collective, which is something started by John Alexander, who wrote Citizens, the book. And, I have found so many times that people who are in one space are popping up in another space because they're drawn to it. And I think just like we found each other, I'm actively reaching out to people in my network and people who speak my language, and I'm really leaning into the fact that people will talk to you in this kind of world. People are so open and so easy to talk to, and you don't have to jump through hoops. You don't have to be somebody. um I'm really kind of leaning into like my networking side, which I've kind of shied away from in the past because people are very different in business as usual world. So yeah, just ask, just connect, and then I'm
I
sure
love
we'll,
that.
yeah.
It's this beautiful world of regenerative, hope that also is non-hierarchical and
Yeah.
welcoming and open. So, wow, love that so much. Lorna, you're such a gift. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining and can't wait to talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye.